I got the blues now, baby, 'cause I haven't read in a while. You know I haven't been reading at all.
You got them blues, baby. Well, I got news that'll make you smile.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Come hitch a ride on that rainbow, and it'll cure what ails you. That ain't no lie.
Oh, hold up, mama. How am I gonna hitch on this reading rainbow? Is it gonna be on a bike or a train or a scooter car?
No, 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 no. You just gotta ride that butterfly in the sky.
Oh, now we're talking. Yeah, I'm gonna wash my blues away, baby. Ride that reading rainbow till I die.
Book 3, Chapter 3. So we left off with poor Winston being brutalized and tortured by O'Brien inside of room 101. And O'Brien last says to Winston, or Winston rather, asks O'Brien, what is room 101? And we discussed in class that it could either mean the place where you are going to be punished / tortured, or the place where you change, perhaps the place where you die. So basically that's where we've left him. And a needle jerked into his arm and he fell asleep. So Book 3, Chapter 3. There are 3 stages in your reintegration, said O'Brien. There is learning, there is understanding, and there is acceptance. It's time for you to enter upon the 2nd stage. So if you're following along in your reading guides and it asks you what are the 3 stages of reintegration, it is learning, understanding, and acceptance. And O'Brien says now it's time to go into your 2nd stage, meaning that Winston has completed the learning stage. He's learned about the why the government is doing what they're doing, and now he needs to go into the stage of understanding. As always, Winston was lying flat on his back, but of late his bonds were looser. They still held him to bed, but he could move his knees a little and could turn his head from side to side and raise his arms from the elbow. The dial also had grown to be less of a terror. He could evade its pangs if he were quick-witted enough. It was chiefly when he showed stupidity that O'Brien pulled the lever. Sometimes they got through a whole session without use of the dial. He could not remember how many sessions there had been. The whole process seemed to stretch out over a long, indefinite time, weeks possibly, and the intervals between the sessions might sometimes have been days, sometimes only an hour or two. So basically, Winston has been through this tortured process so many times with O'Brien that he can't count how many times it's happened. And now he's a little less worried about the dial and the electrocution because as long as he does what he's supposed to do and says what he's supposed to say, it won't happen. And I skipped by accident question 2 where it says, what do you think that O'Brien means by reintegration? So where is he reintegrating? Into the real world? Into the party? Is he reintegrating back into society? Is he reintegrating in himself and then he's going to find death? I mean, I don't know. It's really up to whatever you think. And then number 3 says, when Winston says it was chiefly when he showed stupidity that O'Brien pulled the lever, what might that tell you about Winston and how he's feeling about the situation that he is in? Do you think that he's starting to realize that he's the stupid one? Because he's claiming that when he is offering stupidity, that's when O'Brien is going to shock him. So who's the one who's determining what is stupid and what is not stupid? As you lie there, said O'Brien, you've often wondered, you've even asked me, why the Ministry of Love should expend so much time and trouble on you. And when you were free, you were puzzled by what was essentially the same question. You could grasp the mechanics of the society you lived in, but not its underlying motives. Do you remember writing in your diary, I understand how, I do not understand why it is when you thought about why that you doubted your sanity. You have read the book, Goldstein's book, or parts of it at least. Did it tell you anything that you did not already know? You've read it? Said Winston. I wrote it. That is to say, I collaborated in writing it. No book is produced individually, as you know. Is it true, what it says? As description, yes. The program it sets forth is nonsense. The secret accumulation of knowledge, a gradual spread of enlightenment. ultimately a proletarian rebellion, the overthrow of the party. You foresaw yourself that was what it would say. It was all nonsense. The proletarians will never revolt, not in 1,000 years or 1,000,000. They cannot. I do not have to tell you the reason. You know it already. If you've ever cherished any dreams of violent insurrection, you must abandon them. There is no way in which the party can be overthrown. The rule of the party is forever. Make that the starting point of your thoughts. So O'Brien just reveals to Winston that he is one of the members who wrote that Goldstein book, the one we were talking about, how that's the one that Winston couldn't wait to read because he believed that Goldstein was the author of it, the leader of the Brotherhood. And in the book, it was all things he already knew, basically. And so now O'Brien's saying to him, all those things that we wrote in the book were just made up. So you should stop believing in the thought that the party will ever lose, because it won't. Nothing will ever overthrow it, which is interesting to think because didn't Julia say the same thing? He came closer to the bed. Forever, he repeated. And now let us get back to the question of how and why. You understand well enough how the party maintains itself in the power. Now tell me why we cling to power. What is our motive? Why should we want power? Go on, speak, he added as Winston remained silent. Nevertheless, Winston did not speak for another moment or two. A feeling of weariness had overwhelmed him. The faint, mad gleam of enthusiasm had come back into O'Brien's face, and he knew in advance what O'Brien would say, that the party did not seek power for its own ends, but only for the good of the majority. That it sought power because men in the mass were frail, cowardly creatures who could not endure liberty or face the truth, and must be ruled over and systematically deceived by others who were stronger than themselves. That the choice for mankind lay between freedom and happiness, and that for the great bulk of mankind, happiness was better. That the party was the eternal guardian of the weak, a dedicated sect doing evil that good might come, sacrificing its own happiness to that of others. The terrible thing, thought Winston, the terrible thing was that when O'Brien said this, he would believe it. You could see it in his face. O'Brien knew everything, 1,000 times better than Winston. He knew what the world was really like, in what degradation the mass of human beings lived, and by what lies and barbarities the party kept them there. He had understood it all, weighed it all, and it made no difference. All was justified by the ultimate purpose. What can you do, thought Winston, against a lunatic who is more intelligent than yourself, who gives your arguments a fair hearing and then simply persists in his own lunacy? So, it's interesting to think that not only did O'Brien write the book, which implies all kinds of things about the Brotherhood, so does that mean that the Brotherhood never existed? Does that mean that O'Brien was once part of the Brotherhood and then was brainwashed into being a party leader he is today? I mean, O'Brien's a really complex character. And now O'Brien is asking Winston, why do you think the government wants all this power? And Winston's having this moment saying to himself, like, I know the answer. I know what he wants me to say. And if I say it, he's going to believe that I believe it. But if I say it, or if I say my own beliefs, this person is going to conflict my own thoughts so thoroughly that it's going to make me question my own beliefs. So do I even say what I believe, or do I say what I know he wants me to say? And so Winston says, "You're ruling over us for our own good," he said feebly. "You believe that human beings are not fit to govern themselves, and therefore," he started and almost cried out. A pang of pain had shot through his body. O'Brien had pushed the lever of the dial up to 35. So Winston decided to say what he thought O'Brien would want to hear instead of his own beliefs, and he just got shocked. "That was stupid, Winston, stupid," he said. "You should know better than to say a thing like that." He pulled the lever back and continued. "Now I will tell you the answer to my question. It is this. The party seeks power entirely for its own sake. We're not interested in the good of others. We're interested solely in power. Not wealth or luxury or long life or happiness, only power, pure power. What power means, when you will understand presently. We are different from all of the other oligarchies of the past in that we know what we are doing. All the others, even those who resembled ourselves, were cowards and hypocrites. The German Nazis and the Russian communists came very close to us in their methods, but they never had the courage to recognize their own motives. They pretended, perhaps, they even believed that they had seized power unwillingly and for a limited time, and that just round the corner there lay a paradise where human beings would be free and equal. We are not like that. We know that no one ever seizes power with the intention of relinquishing it. Power is not a means, it is an end. One does not establish a dictatorship in order to safeguard a revolution. One makes the revolution in order to establish the dictatorship. The object of persecution is persecution. The object of torture is torture. The object of power is power. Now do you begin to understand me? Whew, O'Brien is really intense. So he's basically saying the reason why this party is in such a good lead and why they're never going to lose their stride is because they have all the power, and the only power they want is the power. They don't want to share it. They're not doing it for good. They're literally just holding on to this power so that they can be the most powerful thing in the world. Winston was struck, as he had been struck before, by the tiredness of O'Brien's face. It was strong and fleshy and brutal. It was full of intelligence and a sort of controlled passion before which he felt himself helpless, but it was tired. There were pouches under his eyes. The skin sagged from the cheekbones. O'Brien leaned over him, deliberately bringing the worn face nearer. "You're thinking," he said, that my face is old and tired. You're thinking that I talk of power, and yet I'm not even able to prevent the decay of my own body. Can you not understand, Winston, that the individual is only a cell? The wariness of the cell is the vigor of the organism. Do you die when you cut your fingernails?" He turned away from the bed and began strolling up and down again, one hand in his pocket. So it's interesting, too, that here's Winston laying in this bed, just like trying to survive, basically, and O'Brien is giving him all this information of like crazy town information, including the fact that he is believing that the government is doing this for its own right, and while all that's happening, Winston's just looking at his face, thinking like, "Dang, you look old," and O'Brien's just like, "You're thinking I look old." So in 5, it says O'Brien knows what's going on in Winston's mind seemingly the entire time. So what do you think that means? We know that O'Brien is a brilliant, brilliant person. So what does it mean that he can, think, he knows Winston's thoughts as Winston is thinking them? "We are the priests of power," he said. "God is power. But at present, power is only a word so far as you are concerned. It's time for you to gather some idea of what power means. The first thing you must realize is that power is collective. The individual only has power insofar as he ceases to be an individual. You know the party slogan, 'Freedom is slavery.' Has it ever occurred to you that it is reversible? Slavery is freedom. Alone, free, the human being is always defeated. It must be so, because every human being is doomed to die, which is the greatest of all failures. But if he can make complete, utter submission, if he can escape from his identity, if he can merge himself in the party so that he is the party, then he is all-powerful and immortal. The second thing for you to realize is that power is power over human beings, over the body, but above all, over the mind. Power over matter, external reality, as you would call it, is not important. Already our control over matter is absolute." For a moment, Winston ignored the dial. He made a violent effort to raise himself into a sitting position and merely succeeded in wrenching his body painfully. "But how can you control matter?" he burst out. "You don't even control the climate, or the law of gravity, and there are disease, pain, death." O'Brien silenced him by a movement of the hand, like as if he's going to go touch the dial, and then Winston just kind of shuts up. "We control matter because we control the mind. Reality is inside the skull. You will learn by degrees, Winston. There is nothing that we could not do. Invisibility, levitation, anything. I could float off this floor like a soap bubble if I wished to. I do not wish to because the party does not wish it. You must get rid of those 19th century ideas about the laws of nature. We make the laws of nature." "But you do not. You're not even masters of this planet. What about Eurasia and East Asia? You've not conquered them yet. Unimportant. We shall conquer them when it suits us, and if we do not, what difference would it make? We can shut them up out of existence. Oceania is the world." "But the world itself is only a speck of dust. A man is tiny, helpless. How long has he been in existence? For millions of years the earth was uninhabited." "Nonsense! The earth is as old as we are, no older. How could it be older? Nothing exists except human thought and consciousness." "But the rocks are full of the bones of extinct animals, mammoths and mastodons, enormous reptiles which lived here long before man was ever heard of. Have you ever seen those bones, Winston? Of course not. 19th century biologists invented them. Before man, there was nothing. After man, if he could come to an end, there would be nothing. Outside man, there is nothing." "But the whole universe is outside us. Look at the stars. Some of them are 1,000,000 light years away. They are out of our reach forever." "Well, what are the stars?" said O'Brien indifferently. "They're bits of fire a few kilometers away. We could reach them if we wanted to, or we could blot them out. The earth is the center of the universe. The sun and the stars go round it." Winston made another convulsive movement. This time he did not say anything. O'Brien continued as though answering a spoken objection. For certain purposes, of course, that is not true. When we navigate the ocean or when we predict an eclipse, we often find it convenient to assume that the Earth goes around the sun and that the stars are millions upon millions of kilometers away. But what of it? Do you suppose it is beyond us to produce a dual system of astronomy? The stars can be near or distant, according as we need them. Do you suppose our mathematicians are unequal to that? Have you forgotten doublethink? Oh man, it's like having a conversation with a crazy person. So Winston is like, there is so much more to the world than what humans perceive. Our perception of reality is only part of what reality really is. And O'Brien is like, no, no, no. Outside of humans and outside of the party, there is no reality. And he believes it to the death. And his job is to prove Winston that he's right and that Winston is wrong. So in 6 it says, Winston's a brilliant thinker. In a world like Oceania where people in the party just do their jobs and don't really exist and the proles just live poor and have kids and die, why is O'Brien so hell-bent on controlling Winston's mind? What is it about Winston that O'Brien is especially pushing at to try and get him to change? If you think back a couple of chapters, there's a part where O'Brien calls him a stain on society that needs to be wiped out. And if you imagine looking at a crowd of people and they're all wearing a white shirt and there's one person wearing a red shirt, your eye is going to go directly to that person in the red shirt, right? I mean, it's just natural. You're just going to look at the one thing that's standing out, the one thing that's not the same. And in this case, that's Winston. You know, everyone else in Oceania is doing what they're supposed to do for the most part. You know, they're going to work, they're doing their job, they're paying their bills, they're doing the thing that they're supposed to be doing, and Winston is the only one who's just kind of going against the grain. And so O'Brien is taking all this time to make sure that he is convinced of his own inferiority and his own wrongness, to the point of, you know, he's going to make Winston kind of go crazy and then make him, you know, and then maybe kill him or he's going to die or whatever, believing that he was the crazy one. Winston shrank back upon the bed. Oh, and the whole thing about doublethink, too, is kind of cool to think about. Like, that's how the party controls everybody, right, with doublethink. And so O'Brien's like, if I tell the people of Oceania that the stars are close enough to touch, people are going to believe it. And that's the sad truth, right? Don't all the party members just like believe everything they hear and believe everything they read, even when they know that there's facts and truth around it? They just ignore it. They'd rather just believe the thing they're told because that's what they're supposed to do. So that's what O'Brien's saying. Like, don't question those things. If I want it changed, I will change it. So Winston shrank back upon the bed. Whatever he said, the swift answer crushed him like a bludgeon. And yet he knew that he was in the right. The belief that nothing existed outside of your own, surely there must be some way of demonstrating that it was false. Had it not been exposed long ago as a fallacy? There was even a name for it, which he had forgotten. A faint smile twitched the corners of O'Brien's mouth as he looked down at him. I told you, Winston, he said, that metaphysics is not your strong point. The word you're trying to think of is solipsism. But you are mistaken. This is not solipsism. Collective solipsism, if you like, but that is a different thing. In fact, the opposite thing. All this is digression, he added in a different tone. The real power, the power we have to fight for night and day, is not power over things, but over men. He paused, and for a moment assumed again his air of schoolmaster questioning a promising pupil. How does one man assert his power over another, Winston? Winston thought. By making him suffer, he said. Exactly, by making him suffer. Obedience is not enough. Unless he is suffering, how can you be sure that he is obeying your will and not his own? Power is in inflicting pain and humiliation. Power is in tearing human minds to pieces and putting them together again in new shapes of your own choosing. Do you begin to see, then, what kind of world we are creating? It is the exact opposite of the stupid, hedonistic utopias that the old reformers imagined. A world of fear and treachery and torment, a world of trampling and being trampled upon, a world which will grow not less but more merciless as if it refines itself. Progress in our world will be progress toward more pain. The old civilizations claimed that they were founded on love and justice. Ours is founded upon hatred. So how is it that O'Brien is viewing the control of other men? Through suffering and, humiliation and all the things that they do to their party members and the proles, right? Starving them only giving them crappy foods and crappy versions of everything. They're really like holding them under oppression because that is how they make sure that they are obeying, because they're scared and they're suffering. And now he's saying that the government that they plan on creating and the world they want in the future, they want it to be merciless. They want it to be built on pain and fear. So Big Brother, O'Brien believes that Big Brother was mainly founded on, was it fear, he said? On hatred. So he says the old civilizations claim that they were founded on love and justice. Ours is founded upon hatred. So if Big Brother is founded on hatred, you can only imagine what kind of life these people are going to live in. In our world, there will be no emotions except fear, rage, triumph, and self-abasement. Everything else we shall destroy, everything. Already we're breaking down the habits of thought which have survived from before the revolution. We've cut the links between child and parent, and between man and man, and between man and woman, and they have. Haven't they already succeeded in that? They've taken the children away and made them into spies that turn against their parents. They've made people not marry for love, but marry just for children. They've taken away all of those human emotions and human rights that you have when you're born. No one dares trust a wife or a child or a friend any longer, but in the future there will be no wives and no friends. So your last question is asking, the life of the world that O'Brien imagines of the future is pretty freaking stark and dire, so name 2 things O'Brien sees different, and here it is. He believes that there will be no wives, no children. Children will be taken from their mothers at birth as one takes eggs from a hen. The sex instinct will be eradicated. Procreation will be of annual formality, like the renewal of a ration card. So basically, to have sex, you go in once a year, and you basically just have sex with someone to make a kid, and that's it. We shall abolish orgasm. Our neurologists are at work upon it now. There will be no loyalty except loyalty toward the party. There will be no love except the love of being Big Brother. There will be no laughter except the laugh of triumph over defeated enemy. There will be no art, no literature, no science. When we are omnipotent, we shall have no more need of science. There will be no distinction between beauty and ugliness. There will be no curiosity, no employment of the process of life. All competing pleasures will be destroyed. But always, do not forget this, Winston, always there will be the intoxication of power, constantly increasing and constantly growing subtler. Always, at every moment, there will be the thrill of victory, the sensation of trampling on an enemy who is helpless. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever.